The little town that shined. In the quiet town of Maplewood, tucked between rolling hills and endless rows of oak trees, life moved at a slower pace. The streets were lined with old lampposts, the kind that flickered on at dusk and bathed the sidewalks in warm, golden light. For years, Maplewood had been a place where neighbors waved, families gathered at the diner on Saturdays, the children played until the sun sank into the horizon. But like many small towns, Maplewood had its challenges. Businesses closed, paint chipped from storefronts, and younger generations left for bigger cities. What remained were a handful of families who carried the heartbeat of the community, hoping for something to rekindle that spark. Among them was 12-year-old Emma Parker. She was curious, thoughtful, and always had a notebook in her backpack. Emma loved to write short stories about the people she saw every day. Mr. Johnson, the barber who still cut hair with steady hands at 82. Mrs. Green, who baked pies so delicious they won county fair ribbons year after year. And her dad, a mechanic who could fix anything, but often worried about bills stacking up on the kitchen counter. One evening, Emma sat at the family's kitchen table, listening to her parents whisper about how difficult things had become. Her dad's shop was barely bringing in enough customers. Her mom, who worked at the diner, had heard rumors of layoffs. The town, it seemed, was slipping into silence. Emma tapped her pencil against her notebook and thought, what if the town just needed a story to remember who it really was? The next morning, Emma walked through Main Street with a determined look in her eye. She stopped at each storefront and scribbled notes. The empty bookstore that once hosted readings, the post office with its peeling paint, the diner that smelled like fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. That afternoon, she began writing a story. Not just any story, but the story of Maplewood. She described the laughter of children echoing down the streets, the kindness of neighbors helping each other after snowstorms, and the little traditions that made the town special, like the annual fall harvest parade. Emma titled it, The Little Town That Shined. On Sunday, Emma nervously carried her handwritten story to the diner. The place was packed with families eating pancakes and bacon, the kind of meal that stretched across generations. She asked the owner, Mrs. Peterson, if she could read something aloud. At first, the crowd chuckled. What could a 12-year-old possibly say that would matter? But as Emma's voice filled the room, silence settled over the tables. She read about hope, resilience, and the beauty of community. She reminded everyone of what Maplewood used to be, and what it could still be. By the time she finished, a few people were wiping away tears. Mrs. Green, holding a pie in her hands, whispered, "We forgot how much this town means." The story spread quickly. The local paper published it on the front page. Neighbors shared it online with the headline, "The Little Town That Shined, an inspirational story about Maplewood." Something remarkable happened. People began stepping up. Volunteers painted the post office. A group of teenagers cleaned the old park. Mr. Johnson, the barber, offered free haircuts to kids starting school. Even Emma's dad noticed more cars pulling into his shop, customers telling him, "We read your daughter's story. We want to support local." Soon, Maplewood wasn't just surviving, it was thriving again. Years later, when Emma grew up and became a published author, people often asked her how she started writing stories that touched so many lives. She always smiled and said, "It began in a little town that needed hope. I wrote down what I saw, but also what I believed could be true. And when people believed the story, they began living it." Maplewood remained small, but it never faded. It was proof that sometimes the simplest story, the story of neighbors, family, and faith in each other, was enough to change everything. And the title Emma gave her first story still rang true, The Little Town That Shined.